Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born and raised. It was here where I was given a chance at life, being conceived after my mother was violated at the age of 16. This is where I received my education and learned with hard work, discipline, and courage anything was possible. But things have changed. This is not the Oklahoma I remember. Over the last several years, I've seen fear, chaos, and division tear this nation apart through the efforts of communists and the apathy of Republicans in name only, who are either incapable or unwilling to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given rights. Election fraud, open borders, riots, unvetted Afghan refugees, and 300,000 plus acres of land sold to Chinese nationals has made Oklahoma the hub for human trafficking, the indoctrination of our children in critical race theory, sexual immorality, and abortion on demand. And finally, the unconstitutional and illegal vaccine mandate, leaving hundreds of thousands of our legal and law-abiding citizens jobless. Enough is enough, and the political theater must stop. We must have a governor who's willing to lead legislators and Oklahomans to fight back against this tyranny and aggressively address these issues head-on. As the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I will, in the first 100 days, initiate a forensic audit with canvases to ensure election integrity, secure Oklahoma's borders, stop all state funding to school districts who train or teach CRT to faculty, staff, or students, and end all abortions. Oklahoma, let's put our faith back in God, believe that nothing is impossible, and make Oklahoma free again. Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born and raised. It was here where I was given a chance at life, being conceived after my mother was violated at the age of 16. This is where I received my education and learned with hard work, discipline, and courage anything was possible. But things have changed. This is not the Oklahoma I remember. Over the last several years, I've seen fear, chaos, and division tear this nation apart through the efforts of communists and the apathy of Republicans in name only, who are either incapable or unwilling to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given rights. Election fraud, open borders, riots, unvetted Afghan refugees, and 300,000 plus acres of land sold to Chinese nationals has made Oklahoma the hub for human trafficking, the indoctrination of our children in critical race theory, sexual immorality, and abortion on demand. And finally, the unconstitutional and illegal vaccine mandate, leaving hundreds of thousands of our legal and law-abiding citizens jobless. Enough is enough, and the political theater must stop. We must have a governor who's willing to lead legislators and Oklahomans to fight back against this tyranny and aggressively address these issues head-on. As the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I will, in the first 100 days, initiate a forensic audit with canvases to ensure election integrity, secure Oklahoma's borders, stop all state funding to school districts who train or teach CRT to faculty, staff, or students, and end all abortions. Oklahoma, let's put our faith back in God, believe that nothing is impossible, and make Oklahoma free again. Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born and raised. It was here where I was given a chance at life, being conceived after my mother was violated at the age of 16. This is where I received my education and learned with hard work, discipline, and courage anything was possible. But things have changed. This is not the Oklahoma I remember. Over the last several years, I've seen fear, chaos, and division tear this nation apart through the efforts of communists and the apathy of Republicans in name only, who are either incapable or unwilling to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given rights. Election fraud, open borders, riots, unvetted Afghan refugees, and 300,000 plus acres of land sold to Chinese nationals has made Oklahoma the hub for human trafficking, the indoctrination of our children in critical race theory, sexual immorality, and abortion on demand. And finally, the unconstitutional and illegal vaccine mandate, leaving hundreds of thousands of our legal and law-abiding citizens jobless. Enough is enough, and the political theater must stop. We must have a governor who's willing to lead legislators and Oklahomans to fight back against this tyranny and aggressively address these issues head-on. As the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I will, in the first 100 days, initiate a forensic audit with canvases to ensure election integrity, secure Oklahoma's borders, stop all state funding to school districts who train or teach CRT to faculty, staff, or students, and end all abortions. Oklahoma, let's put our faith back in God, believe that nothing is impossible, and make Oklahoma free again. Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born. Welcome, everyone, to another virtual town hall meeting. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dr. Marc Thielman. As many of you know already, we're here because we're running for governor of the state of Oklahoma. We're super happy to be a part of your lives. Thank you for being with us now, wherever you are in the world and the country. And we appreciate all of your support with these virtual town halls, thousands of you that continue to tune in and tell us to go ahead and keep them going. And so I'll be introducing our guest tonight, special guest, very good friend of mine who I met a couple months ago, and just some struck a chord with me. And I'll tell you more about him in a second before I bring him on, but we're going to continue to push this thing out. So we've been pushing this mission of Oklahoma first, and we have to begin to expand it to begin to think about America first. And there's a group of candidates out here across our country that really represent those values very well. And certainly as we go forward, we'll continue to do that, knowing full well that we must save our states in order to save the republic. If we don't save the states, we don't have a republic. If we put all our energy trying to allow Washington to do our biddings for us, more salvation work for us, we are spending our money and spinning our wheels literally in the wrong direction. So we need to not grow Washington more. We need to grow Washington less. We need to make sure the people's voice gets heard. When the people step up and truly become we the people once again, we will win. However, if our voices remain quiet, we continue to be passive, we continue to turn the other cheek, so to speak, and not invoke our freedoms and liberties with force and confidence like we should, and courageousness, we will lose. And folks, we're on the teetering edge right now. We're on the precipice of losing it all because of inaction. We have allowed the federal overreach tyranny that is to create an agenda, to create a culture climate that is contrary to the founding fathers' vision that was given to them by God. And so because of that, we have an opportunity right now to do something great. I'm grateful for hard times because hard times bring about reality. Reality brings about vision of people to see a country and states get out of that hard time to get back to greatness once again. It has been said that the times of great trauma, the times of great tragedy, the times of great drama, they bring about great men and they bring about great women. And when we get lackadaisical, those good times that we create can become times of great trauma again. And so we don't need to get lax anymore. We have been, and we need to own that. Now, with that said, just a couple quick updates. Many of you have asked where we're going to be next in person. We do a lot of these, of course. You can find that on the app right now, Sherwood 2022. Go right here. You can see a really cool saying we have on there: never bow down to tyrants, defy them. And yeah, I'm there, and I'm not smiling much because it's not a smiling moment. But just know that here, we need to get out there and fight, right? And it's a big deal. So Sherwood 2022, I encourage you wherever you are in the country to download that app so that you can pray for us. We'd appreciate that very much. But secondly, you need to see the platform stances. Any candidate that doesn't put their policies and where they stand down here, they've got something to hide. Make them put it out here publicly, and that's a contract they have with you. So please, 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 do that. We have a ton of events coming up. There's a ton of primaries happening around, not just in Oklahoma on June 28th, but around the country. And you need to be aware of them. We're going to make you aware of one shortly, because we have people that we've dealt with the Functional Medical Institute for a number of years around these United States of America. Now, with that said as well, I want you to, again, download the app. And also during the time our guest is here, I'll be monitoring the questions on Facebook. And so I want you to go ahead and put your questions in there, and I'll ask our guest in just a moment. Now, our guest today, without further ado, I met him a while back. We were at the Reawaken Tour in the state of Oregon, specifically the city of Salem. And I heard there was a gentleman there running for governor, and I wanted to go meet the man because we have a vision that governors can work together for the common good, much like we used to do back in 1776. Haha, memories coming there. But I met this man, and I was struck by his genuineness, his hospitality, because he did talk to me a lot and was very open. And most of all, his passion for doing things right. He hasn't had an easy walk, an easy life. He's had some things he's had to overcome, but that put in him a fire that I was very appreciative of and admirable of as well. So this gentleman, I met him again in Oregon, and I saw him as a winning person. I saw him as the next governor of Oregon, and I saw him as someone that I wanted to link arms with and stand firm. With that said, let me just welcome the next governor of the state of Oregon, Mr. Marc Thielman. Marc, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you very much.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. It's awesome.
So we'll make sure we put your feed down here. It's Marc, M-A-R-C. Now, my name's a K, marc4oregon.com. And we'll make sure we put that in the feed down here so you guys can see how to reach him, because we have a ton of people that in the northwest part of the country, and also people that know people there. So if you're listening right now, make sure you follow Marc, because he is a guy that's going to really do the right thing. So let's get into this thing, man. So I want to hear from the beginning, what made you decide that you were going to throw your hat in life in the race, literally?
Well, just the long of it is I moved to Oregon to be a superintendent in my mid-30s and fell in love with this state. I came from Washington State originally, and Oregon is just a beautiful state. And, you got a chance to come out here and just fly over it and land here and see how beautiful it is. And there's amazing people here. We have the pioneer spirit here still. And so life in Oregon has always been good, but it's been increasingly oppressive as our political party took over the last, really since 2016. They've had almost a super majority. They control all the offices, the judges, the attorney general, all three branches of the government. And that created a nightmare. And then along came COVID. And things were very oppressive here during COVID, much worse than many other states. And, I can't tell you how many people come into Oregon or find out I'm from Oregon, and they'll contact me and say, how can you, why would you stay there? And, well, the reason I'm staying here is Oregon is worth fighting for. And we are the battlefront. We're the next Virginia here. And you kind of sensed that, I think, when you were over here. I think it was the second largest reawakening tour, I think, that at that time.
That's right.
And I know there were a lot of surprised people to see, 5,000 people of faith show up in a tent. And the energy and the fervor, it was incredible. And, and obviously you and I got a chance to meet and talk. So what I want people to understand too is I've been legislatively connected kind of behind the scenes since 2010. And I have a good mind for political strategy, solving complex problems with policy, but I never had any aspirations to ever be an elected official or a representative or even a governor. Until COVID came and, they shut down our schools, they shut down our churches, they shut down our businesses, and then they didn't open them, and they wanted to pick and choose. Things are so egregious here that for example, when the vaccines came up for availability, Oregon is literally run by public unions, that they had teachers go get the shot before elderly in this state. And which, if you remember at the time, the recommendation was, just protect the vulnerable. Remember all that? That was before it was everybody has to get the shot. And it shows you the sway that teachers unions have here in Oregon. So, we have almost an oligarchy here. And man, I just was losing my ever-loving mind, because I'm trying to keep my school open, which I did. I kept my school open K-12. And that was very inconvenient for the governor. And that's what landed me in the news multiple times. But we had 0 cases of COVID traced to the school. And then I started taking the message out to other school districts. Here's how you open your school safely. Here's how you structure here's how you do here's how you educate your parents on what to do and how to keep everybody safe and keep things rolling. And So as things escalated, it just came to me. God really called on my heart. I thought he was crazy because it was. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
It was a clear message, and so I don't want to be disobedient. You know that. I like to live my faith, and I like to live my values and virtues. So I said, okay. So I said, I'm running for governor, and now here I am. And what's amazing is my campaign here in Oregon has just been exploding. We're just incredibly popular, but we don't have the $3 million of some of my opponents. But we have I think at this point, I think we have the largest number of donors of any gubernatorial campaign here in Oregon, and there's 19 people running. So that ought to tell you a little bit about we the people here. So it's a grassroots campaign, and it's about faith, family, and freedom. And I'm the famous school superintendent because I think I told you the last thing I did was I just said no when the science said masks were not effective at stopping the spread, and but the CDC even conceded that they were doing harm to kids and harming student education. That was it. So my school board worked with me, and we passed they passed a resolution to empower me, and I implemented it, and we gave parents their rights back. And parents took those rights. We had almost 92%, 94%, somewhere in there. Parents told their kids, you don't have to wear a mask at school. It's pretty powerful.
I'm sure that was a big party for the students, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, the government lost their mind.
Yeah.
And, it was some rough navigation or rough seas for a while, but I held firm. And I talked it right back, and I went right at the media when they would ask me those questions. And that got me on national news. So, Mark, if you ever want to be on national news, just do that. Okay.
Good point. Yeah. When you did that, you must have thought about what may happen. Mm-hmm. Talk us through maybe your thought process of what may happen, because you couldn't have known exactly how it was going to end up.
Well, when we first implemented on Sunday, the government responded, which is not normally you'd think they'd wait till Monday, but they emailed me the nastygram in very threatening letter and they said you have 8 days to comply. And so I went back to work, and that was I called that the lonely week, because everyone the whole state, it was all over the news. Everybody was watching, and but no other school districts had stepped up yet. Some of the a lot of the students were still learning about it, and serendipitously there was this crazy protest up in Canada with truckers.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so that was a rough week, but and I was expecting fines, and I was expecting a lot of negativity, and I was expecting what came in terms of people calling me a murderer and that kind of thing. But what happened? There was some of that. So here's the government, full threat. Boom, we're going to take your license. We're going to sue you personally. You've got 8 days to get back into compliance, and we're going to freeze your federal funds, your COVID money. The reality of it, though, is simultaneously hundreds of emails. There were some phone calls, but mostly emails of people praising the action. Mm-hmm. Parents, moms and dads, small business people from all over the country were emailing, and we by the end of the week, it was almost an inch thick, just if you print them off and stack them up. And then the negatives were just a hair over an eighth of an inch, not quite a quarter of an inch. What does that tell you? The government was not in alignment with the people. And that's how I stayed strong. I just kept looking at those piles as they were piling up. And
when you did that, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned a moment ago that no other schools did that.
No.
Two questions, two-part question. Did you feel kind of lonely? Number one, and number two, what do you make of the other schools not stepping up?
Well, just so everyone knows that in Oregon, they spent months getting superintendents. There's 197 school districts in the state, and I was the only publicly declared conservative superintendent. No one else, everyone else, if you ask them, was a Democrat. And the culture here is oppressive. You must comply or you will lose your job and you'll never get another one. And so a lot of people aren't willing to take those risks. So that first week went by and no action except all those emails, right? Well, guess what happened? Suddenly, the next week, there's this little thing where the Tillamook School District was having a special board meeting to talk about making masks optional. And then Harrisburg, and then Malala, and then, I mean, it was amazing. School after school after school started up. And then students, high school students in the bigger districts found out that kids in LC weren't wearing masks, so they did walkouts. And
wow.
And it just blossomed. Ooh. So the government, and then I responded, that first week I responded to them. That's the part I forgot to tell you, is they gave me 8 days, and on the 8th day, I wrote them back, and then I gave them 8 days in my response. I said, you have 8 days to respond to this, response. And on the 8th day, they had a big press conference and announced, they set an end date to masking, and it was supposed to be the 31st of March. And then those protests started out. And so then that caused them to move it to the 19th. And some of those school districts said, nope, it's still too long, as we're in the last week of February by now. And still too long. And so then they moved it to the 12th, and Governor Brown here in Oregon got California and Washington to move with her. Now that's courage, huh?
Oh yeah, right, exactly. It's sad that people are going through that, but I got to tell you, I appreciate you stepping up, because sometimes the first person that steps up, being the leader, other people get behind it, and I know that probably was a little bit painful for you being out there, but man, Mark, I admire you. I think it was courageous, and I think it was flat out awesome. So well done.
Well, and just for you or any other conservative governor who has love in his heart and believes in faith, family, and freedom, understands that leadership means taking risks. That first week, yes, it was lonely, but I was also on the news every night, looking right in the camera, telling people, our governor doesn't believe in science. The science says masks are harming kids. So mass science says masks don't stop the spread. So I'm the only school superintendent following the science. I throw in those little witty lines, and man, it was amazing the amount of support that generated from mothers in particular, but also fathers. But I'll tell you, the old adage, you don't get between a mama bear and her cubs.
Oh.
Well, the government of Oregon did. And it's changed things permanently here moving forward.
When we were there, you mentioned it was the second largest gathering we had in the Reawaken Tour, and I've been to all of them. And I'll tell you, and I'll affirm to the listeners right now and to what you said, there was, probably 100 people that I personally talked to that were so fired up and were saying, like, I can't believe you come here. We thought we were alone, and they were so motivated and so loving and kind, and it was just great. And I got the opportunity in that conference to be the first speaker and kick it off. So I was very honored, and set the tone there. And boy, they were just into it. And that was probably one of my favorite times, just looking them in the eye and seeing that. I want you guys I'll be monitoring questions. So keep them going on Facebook here. Please do that. Right. So we'll ask. And Mark, you got your website there, Marc, MARC, FOR, Oregon.com. And you've got a lot of platform things here. And I just want to touch on a couple, because it's important, as I said in the intro, to name and list what you're going to do, right? Because, if you don't do that, what are you standing for? Just rhetoric, right? So you've got a couple here, and I want you to kind of elaborate on these. One, you've got restore justice and end lawlessness. Comment on that.
Well, in Oregon, there was a ballot initiative, and it passed. And it was what I call a half truth, and it was coupled along with the rioting and the defund the police. So in the context of that, it was this belief that people who are on hard drugs, we need to get them treatment, not put them in jail. So Oregon is the first state in the union to decriminalize small amounts of hard drugs like cocaine, meth, heroin, opiates, fentanyl. And of course, all that's within the first year, it implemented this last year. And in a normal year in Oregon, we would average around 100 overdoses, which was still pretty high compared to a lot of states, because we're only a 4.3 million person state, a very large state, low population in proportion. This last year, we had over 1,000 of our fellow Oregonians overdose and die.
Wow, 1,000.
Tenfold increase in 1 year. And that is what happens when you remove consequence and accountability.
Wow.
So, you know, and the other thing too is then there was a big push. Now the state of Oregon passed a law that says they can come into anyone's home on suspicion that they own a gun without a warrant and make sure that they're storing it as prescribed, you know, triple or double locked with your ammunition in a separate location. And I cannot think of anything more unconstitutional than that. But it's okay to sit on the court steps of the county seat and the courthouse and shoot up heroin. That's okay. So you can see how out of balance things are. You know, we're having trouble keeping police officers employed. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to decouple funding and restore funding to our police, and let local police or local sheriffs, local police chiefs dictate what to invest that funding in. And some places that'll be, you know, hiring and recruiting and incentivize new officers, new deputies, and other places it'll be equipment and radio systems and other things, because we have large rural areas that are really create some real safety issues for the very few officers that are out there. The other thing too is we have a huge issue with cartel and human trafficking, and this is a symptom of what's going on down at the southern border.
Right.
And Oregon is the human trafficking capital of the Pacific Northwest. So cartels have set up illegal grows down in our southern counties of Jackson and Josephine in particular. And then they've been stealing, literally like drying up creeks, because they divert the water to fund these. And then they're using trafficked people and slave labor to run them. There was just a big bust. And let me show you how it works here. The sheriff of Josephine County went to Governor Brown, our governor, and asked for her help, because the cartels had more guns than the county sheriff, but they wanted to bust this illegal grow because they did their due diligence and there were 300 and something people enslaved there. Mm. And it turned out that it was other counties that brought support and they made the bust, but not Governor Brown. And when they interviewed some of the people that were forced to live and work there were 17 women that had no idea where they were on the planet.
Wow.
And they were from other continents, not necessarily from down south. And I can't tell you the cruelty of it. The children with tattoos, barcodes on their eyes that were tattooed on there as if they're property. And it was a shocking thing to learn. The cartels responded by putting 2 severed heads on the county seat in Josephine County as a message, and still not a single comment from our governor. So it's serious. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about serious security issues. We're talking about illegal cartels and drugs. We're talking about human trafficking of human beings. So law and order is so critical. And when I'm governor, we're going to have very direct. There will be no sheriff begging for support, you know, and we also, you know, if we need to, we'll bring in the National Guard. So we have to secure our southern Oregon border.
Yeah.
And secure it for our citizens and for our farmers and ranchers and people that have a right to those resources.
I appreciate that. What you said about securing borders. I mean, yes, we need to secure our national border, but you talked about state borders. Mm-hmm. And that's a good segue into what I want to talk about, because when you secure state borders, understanding that the sheriff being the highest elected law enforcement officer in the county, for example. Yep. And I've said many times, I think the 2 most important positions right now that need to get it right are the governors and the sheriffs, because of that very premise. Talk about that from your perspective, soon to be Governor Marc. What are you going to do in standing up for and representing and implementing back the constitutional 10th Amendment and everything surrounding that?
Well, a couple of things. So in Oregon, the governor gets to appoint, it's like a DPSD. I don't know if I got the acronym right, but it's a panel that certifies deputies, and the governor gets to appoint the people that run it, which is insane. So there's no elected position. So you can see how progressives have taken over all the elements of government. So let me give you an example. You just said that the sheriff is the highest constitutional, elected person in the county. That is so true. But if the sheriff says to the deputies, okay, we're going to defy the governor's order, the deputies can lose their certification, but the sheriff can't. See how this works? See how they worm their way in? So I'm going to change that. I'm going to restructure that whole committee. And then I'm going to work to have it restructured in the way that half the committee must be, half the positions must be held by elected county sheriffs. You see, if you say half the positions have to be elected sheriffs, now the people, guess what? The people have a check and balance on any future governor who wants to control law enforcement by threatening them with certification. And same thing, we want to have some at-large elected people on there who are elected at large, like you might elect a DA or something. And then you can have some of what I call, de facto appointed people too, because sometimes it's good to have a couple of seats that you can appoint as the governor or something. And now what we have is a balance. And it's so critical because the governor can literally say, you're going to stand down, deputies, or we're going to pull your certification. Yeah. I don't think that exists in your state.
Well, it's interesting, and I think this has been my experience across the country. And, I've been a lot of different places, and and even the listeners know I was in law enforcement for 24 years prior to becoming a naturopathic doctor. And it's fascinating how the the election of sheriffs, it's become so political that there's a fear factor there. They do not, as a general, even in our state, they will not defy even an unlawful order. You mentioned the unlawful order to go in and check on guns. Well, that's a clear violation of the Second Amendment. We have a right to keep. You put that on your website, and I appreciate that. Right to keep and bear arms shall be uninfringed. It's clear, but yet we have a violation of that. Their constitutional right occurring right there in the state of Oregon, and even in my state, the same, maybe not that severe, but the same idea. And so in your position, you're going to instill that culture back. And it sounds like you're going to empower these sheriffs and their appointed deputies to actually do their job and represent the Constitution.
Well, and it's important to do that. Deputies need to know that when they're exercising their duty as laid down by their superiors, right? It could be a lieutenant, could be a police chief, could be the sheriff, depending on what department they work for. They need to know that the governor has their back, and that everyone in law enforcement will be given the benefit of doubt, and that any incident that becomes, egregious or newsworthy will be investigated using a fair process. And that's so critical if we're going to have a civil society, and if we're going to model for our children what we would call the proper order for accountability, that you're innocent until proven guilty, and that you have a jury of your peers, and that you have investigations that are based on fact and not fiction or politics.
And I just want to remind people now, and I'll do it again before the end of the show, your primer is coming up in just a few days, May 17th. So make sure those of you that know us and live in that area, or you know someone that does live in the area, you need to get out there and participate and vote. If you don't participate, you are part of the problem. So if you're out there and you care about your fellow Oregonians and you care about the country, you need to get out there and vote for Marc. And it's important to do that, because if you don't do that, you allow something to happen. And I'd rather be someone that dies trying doing something than someone that might live not doing anything. And I think that's a little wisdom nugget for you. I want to hit another area that I thought was fascinating, because a lot of people's put a lot of focus on education, no SEL, CRT, LGBTQ, et cetera. You mentioned something here. I want you to hit on that, but you mentioned open classrooms serving all children. Explain yourself on that, because you being a superintendent have a very unique perspective.
Yeah. So as a conservative superintendent and someone who grew up in business and manufacturing, I really I went to ALC to be the superintendent because I wanted to run a school district that was a public school district, kind of like a business. And you can do that in a small system. there was only 117 students there on my first day of school in 2011. And when I resigned recently, obviously to run full time, but when I resigned, we had almost 1,000 kids. Wow. And it shows you the success of that. And the model works. It's ready. I know this is crazy talk, but first of all, it's built on the premise that children belong to their parents.
Oh, imagine that.
I know I get a lot of heat in some areas of Oregon for saying that. Just so people know, in Oregon, there's 3 billboards on the 205 right now outside of Portland. And the billboard is a plea to people that if you care about the climate, you will not have children. Please don't have children. Okay, so that's, that's crazy talk, But so when you put parents in charge and then you approach parents without judgment, and I trained all my staff, we're not here to judge. And then you have to assign some assumptions. I had a lot of teachers say, well, Johnny or Sally can't learn because they're poor or they're camping or they lost their home. And I always said, we never apply that ever, that if every child that comes through the door is safe, is recognized, and is acknowledged by and has at least one adult in our system that they can connect with and feel comfortable to and confide in. And so what we created was a culture of openness and acceptance, and where judgment was lower and discernment was much higher, and relationships were the focus, and then academic achievement and celebrating each other, even though it's like a cross-country race, right? You start and the students, some learn to read sooner than others, and et cetera. Some have more talents than others in some areas. Some are really good at math, some aren't. But celebrating everyone where they're at, and like a personal record and track, whatever progress you're making. And so what happened was it became contagious. So pretty soon we didn't have to advertise because we're a charter school district. So when we had so many people starting to pour into the district, and that's what they said. It's like a giant family here. I can go to work and know that my kids are going to take care of it no matter what comes up. The staff and LC are going to take care of it. And it's a very different environment from a lot of our public schools. Oh, by the way, we never did CRT or SCL or CSE. And the reason is it's bad for business.
That's good.
Let's be honest. So I hope that answered your question. But I'm going to model that because in Oregon, the governor is the superintendent of public instruction. And so there will be no more CRT. We're going to, we will reinstitute and restore that open culture value where every kid that walks through the door is acknowledged and cared for.
I absolutely love that. And I was so excited to ask you that question because it does come in from people, and you're an interesting individual in that you're coming at it from that perspective based upon hands-on experience. And I'm sure that that's been a welcome response for the parents out there, because you parents, those kids are yours, and it's your opportunity to train them up in the way they should go. It really is. And so I look at that. All right. I think it's important, Mark. I want to, the thing that drew me to you, and I want to definitely get this in here, is you were unashamed of your stance in faith, and I appreciated that so much. Talk about that, would you?
Well, as a Christian man, and I've been through a time or two, I've been through some real challenges in life. I tend to be a plumb line, and I'll come into a new district and, kind of see all the things that are not working right. And then, and I go right at it and I take that hill, and that's great for the people that want change. It's not good for the people who are successful in the old regime. Yeah. But the thing is, I always kept my focus on kids and outcomes for family. And the reason is I see that as an expression of my own values and my own Christian values and faith. Just like, God our Father sees us in the child role and wants us to prosper, but also requires us to engage in relationship and to, model and emulate things that are bigger than ourselves. And so in Oregon, unfortunately, it's such a coercive culture. Most of my superintendent colleagues serve themselves. And here's what serving yourself looks like. You do all the research you can as a biology major and a scientist guy like myself, science teacher, and also as a history teacher, taught all kinds of other things too. kind of a jack of all trades, but as a man of science, when I read all the information on COVID there after, there was the first shutdown in the spring, but coming into the fall, I could not convince myself that we couldn't manage the issue based on all the epidemiological data that was available. And so the thing is, if I was I was in a bad situation where, in terms of the culture here in Oregon, it would have been better for me career-wise to keep school closed.
Yeah.
I could have blamed it all on COVID. I could have stayed home. I would have had the same pay. I would have had a lot less stress. I wouldn't have been in the news. I wouldn't have been investigated multiple times. You see what I'm saying? Or turned into OSHA all those times and had to deal with all that. The problem is that that would have been in opposition to my faith, because God calls us to care about others. God calls us to serve. That's, we're supposed to wash feet in essence. And so I couldn't do it. I couldn't lie to myself, couldn't convince myself. So instead I took the harder path. I said, we're going to be open. I had to work some political things with my political connections to make sure the governor allowed that for small school systems, which she did. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the wins. And then now once we could be open, now I've got to go and I've got to get the teachers in the union to work with me. And I was successful at that. Everyone showed up to work, school opened, and then everybody was waiting for COVID to break out, the news and the media. And it never did. But that first couple of weeks was a little stressful for me. I was like, let's hope we make it. Yeah.
Mark, how
we made it.
You did it, and I'm just super excited for you, and I'm inspired by you, and hopefully people are. As we round up and wind it down our time, I want you to talk about vision for the future. I'm Governor Sherwood, you're Governor Theilman. Mm-hmm. How are governors that are like-minded and congruent in these beliefs, how are we supposed to work together? What's your vision for that?
Well, that, in my opinion, Mark, that'll happen immediately. And I cannot wait to work with you. And, I met Scott Jensen. He's running in, I think it was Missouri, and a gentleman in Nevada, and a couple others. And
Gilbert.
Joey Gilbert. That's right. And I think, we all need, once we all win and we're in office, we need to form a coalition of like-minded states. Yeah. And that includes things like joining up with Texas and Arizona and sending some of our National Guard troops down to help secure the border because we love people and we don't want them trafficked like cattle. See? And that it's all being funded by, the illegal immigration thing. And what it does is it sends a message back to our federal government that says we value people, we love people, and we value safety and security, and we value law and order. And and we are open, but to anyone coming here, but we want them to come legally, and we want them to prosper and be safe and pay taxes, et cetera. And so the thing is, it's a winning argument. It's the winning relationship. And if I was acting alone in Oregon that way, I would be less influential. But if you and I were acting together with 3 or 4 others, imagine what we could accomplish in terms of for humanity, for our nation, for our people, as a country, and also what would we model for the world? It's so important.
That is an amazing analysis, and man, it resonates with me to the heart. And we did not rehearse that answer, ladies and gentlemen, at all. But I knew what the answer was going to be, because when you connect with someone on the same wavelength as we are, where we are loving God and honoring the Constitution, representing the people, it becomes infectious. And again, Mark, M-A-R-K or M-A-R-C, I'm sorry. F-O-R.
C stands for conservative, Mark.
Yeah, M-A-R-C, conservative, right? There you go. I don't know what the K stands for. Who knows? I don't know. But M-A-R-C for Oregon.com. Go there. Check them out. Donate, give. You're supposed to get involved. You need to do that, folks. Seriously, I mean that with all of my heart. Doesn't matter out-of-state candidates. It doesn't matter. You just be obedient. That's the super thing.
Amen. Thank you. It makes a big difference. We are a grassroots campaign. So if anybody wants to donate, we will be very grateful. And, on my campaign, we pray that every dollar we receive, God amplifies 7 times. in terms of influence. And so far, so good.
Well, I believe that is, and God is using you, sir, and I'm honored to call you friend.
Amen.
And certainly future governor, but one day
Yep.
governor. Mark, and a couple minutes left here, and then I'll do some closing remarks before we sign off together. But 30 seconds, what do you want to say to the people?
Well, there's a red wave coming, and Oregon is the next Virginia. We are the battlefront, and turning Oregon red will create a sea change for the rest of our country. And so that's why we need to support grassroots candidates like myself. I'm running for the right reasons. I walked away from a very good job, a 2-year, solid contract. I just walked away cold turkey because none of that matters if we're not free. None of that good fortune and good income means anything if my grandchildren can't grow up free. And that's why I'm doing this. And and it's exciting because it, like you said, it's infectious.
Yeah.
And we have, I don't know, $300,000+ of cash income, but according to the analytics, we have $1.5 million worth of influence. And believe me, they're talking about it in Oregon, and that's the power of God. That's why we're doing this. When your heart's right, everything rolls. And that's what I want to tell everybody, that we need to have love in our hearts, and we need to be firm and fair when things are wrong. And we need to always articulate the why and tell the truth of things.
Well said. Mark, I appreciate you folks. Here are our hearts here together. We are standing together for the right things, the right reasons. You need to get involved. Absolutely, grassroots is the foundation fabric of our great nation. Without the grassroots, we wouldn't have any sort of blossoming flower of this republic. We wouldn't have it. Grassroots stepped up against the British monarchy back in the 1775, 76 area, and they stepped up and says, "Here I am, send me." They were not afraid. So we are not afraid as well. So we encourage you all to step up and become a part. Speak up louder than you've ever spoken before. Be something you've never been before. Do something you've never done before, and become the person that you've always dreamed to be. From Marc Thielman and Mark Sherwood, 2 Marks, different spelling, C for conservative, K for I don't know what for, but funny stuff. We are grateful for you being with us on this town hall, and keep your questions coming in even at the close of this feed, and we'll get on there and answer those things. That's very good. Remember to download our app, the Sherwood 2022. It's right here. We must never bow down to tyrants, defy them. We know there's tyranny going on right now, ladies and gentlemen. When the people fear the government of any form, that's called tyranny. But when the government fears the people, that's called freedom. Freedom is not a spectator sport. Get involved, be heard, be involved, and make a difference. We love you, and we look forward to seeing you next time around. God bless you all.
God bless.
We have up is down, left is right, bad is good, confusion. And God is not the author of confusion.
God wants to bless America, but it starts with his people first, repenting and the ending of sin.
We have been in ministry the last 20 years. It was in prayer that the Lord began to convict me to run for office. And so I'm excited about Dr. Sherwood stepping up to the plate.
This is a man after God's own heart, who will not compromise with the devil.
He's bold, he's courageous.
I'm Nick Vujicic.
Warren Hamilton.
I'm Jake Merrick.
And I endorse
enthusiastically
Dr. Marc Sherwood
as governor of Oklahoma.
The ending of slavery happened with total abolishing of it. We must see this as well for abortion. It's America's Holocaust.
We still have abortions in Oklahoma. How can you be pro-life and have one abortion? Why not stop it right now? And I make a commitment right now that I'm going to do everything I can to completely abolish abortion in the state of Oklahoma within the first 30 days of office.
Vaccine mandates that are being rolled out right now are entirely unconstitutional and unbiblical. Every state that's a member of these United States, that's a member of our union, said we'll abide by the Constitution. That's why we don't tinker with it too much.
So I believe the word mandate doesn't equate to law. I am a big believer in the 10th Amendment, and that means state sovereignty. I would propose that every single business owner in Oklahoma that's affected by that ridiculous mandate push back and say no, because they don't own you. The federal government does not own you. We need to own that amendment, understand what it is, and not be afraid to push back.
We have to understand where critical race theory came from. Obviously, it comes from the Marxist handbook. And if we preach this and promote this, we end up a Marxist nation. It is not social justice. It is not anti-racism. It's actually racism in its purest form. The very thing Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, we're not going to allow this to be taught where we judge by the color of our skin.
There's one race. It's called the human race. I'm not going to apologize for being white. I'm not even white. I don't even know what I am. Kids in school need to be taught how to live life. Right now, we're teaching them theories about how to hate. That's not education. That's brainwashing. We will not do that under my administration. We will fine every school that does that. And if they don't like it, they can take their education and find another state that will accept that nonsense. People all need to be healed. Our state needs to be healed. Our land needs to be healed. The economy needs to be healed. And our confidence needs to be healed. Our hope needs to be restored. God has gifted us as healers. We know that we're called to not just heal people individually like we do, but we know now we're called to heal a group of people called the state of Oklahoma. My name is Mark Sherwood, and I'm running for governor of the state of Oklahoma.